Fallout 4 and the wider world of Fallout has always had a lot of strange and unexplainable things in it. Things that just don't seem to quite fit in with the rest of the world. Supernatural things. The Dunwich building, Oath, and the Crimvecna of Fallout 3 are prime examples of this. The areas or entities that we are going to talk about today are similar examples that can be found in Fallout 4, the most prominent of them as far as I am concerned. We've covered them all over the years, but it's been at least 5.5 years since we've looked at some of these places, so I think it's time to take another look. If you would like to see more of this longer form content that covers multiple areas, leave a like or a comment so the algorithm will bless this video, and click the notifications icon to actually get told when these videos come out. If my voice sounds a little off in this opening, or on the Fogmother or Dunwich Borers parts, I apologise. I was recovering from a throat infection while I was recording them. Now, let's take a look at some supernatural shenanigans. The Grandchester Mystery Mansion, a place we covered many years ago, but I want to talk about it again due to its extremely overt supernatural nature. So, here's the overall story. I go through the entire tour in this video I did over 6 years ago, if you want to watch the whole thing. Lucy was the first and only child of Morticia and Hannibal Grandchester. The birth, and possibly the pregnancy itself, was a difficult one, where Morticia almost didn't survive. This started off Hannibal's resentment for his child, though I can't imagine not wanting children in the first place helped anyway. Additionally, we are told both of them are quite elderly, so I mean it's not as if the pregnancy being difficult should have came as a huge shock. She was apparently a difficult child, though it mentions that she had no friends, and I imagine the resentment of, at the very least, one of her parents didn't help. The tour guide claims she nailed the skins of small animals to the furniture, but we have no evidence of this, so I'm not sure of these claims. Now, due to this behaviour, or supposed behaviour, both parents arrived at the insane conclusion that the child was possessed. It's fine though. A healthy dose of beatings will surely solve the problem, and, you know, not make whatever is happening a lot worse. Now, at some point, a predatory charlatan masquerading as a psychic called Madame Scarlata decided to offer their services to the family, Morticia specifically. She said if Lucy was possessed, then all they had to do was drive out the evil spirits. This is what eventually led the house to have its current appearance. Stairs and doors that go nowhere, loads of fireplaces, rooms with furniture nailed to the ceiling, all apparently done to drive out the spirits. I'm not sure how this is meant to confuse whatever was possessing Lucy, as it was already there, and new ghosts seem like the least of their problems. Moreover, I don't understand the idea that spirits would somehow be confused by poor architectural decisions. I do have to wonder if one of the psychic's friends didn't dare them, just to say, how far can you make this couple go doing stupid shit to their house? At some point, Morticia and Hannibal started to claim that Lucy was going to kill them, such as effigies in their likeness, or an attempt to poison their soup. Now, the guide states that what was ever in the soup somehow caused Hannibal to require a cane to aid his walking. Either that or he just wanted something on hand to swing at Lucy, which he apparently did. Now, I have to wonder, given a cook quit after Lucy apparently put mice in the stew, did they use this as a reason and they themselves were actually behind the poisoning attempt? It would be a great cover, as they were so ready to blame her for everything else that happened. Now, of course, she could have still done it. It's just that the parents aren't really coming off great here, to be honest. Eventually, after several years of being taken advantage of by Madame Scarlata, it all reaches a head in the brutal murder of both of Lucy's parents. Now, I'll admit, if the description of what happened to Hannibal and Lucy's responses are accurate, then it's clear she was very disturbed. She apparently drove a pair of scissors into his brain through his eye socket and cut all his fingers off. If she'd stopped at the eye, that's self-defense, as he apparently came to beat her, but the fingers are a bit too far. Her mother appeared to have been restrained and tortured, and Lucy said the doll did it. This resulted in her being committed to an asylum, whereupon she escaped on her 18th birthday, returned to the house, and took actions that resulted in the cessation of her bodily functions. You know what I mean? YouTube doesn't let me say it anymore. So that is her story. Seemingly a difficult and disturbed child from an early age, her parents threw gasoline in the fire by both mistreating her and resorting to the explanation of possession and ghosts. The alternative would be admitting that they just weren't great parents, and we all know how tough a pill to swallow that is for some small-minded bastards. I also want to point out that the narration of these events is not only dramatised, but done so from likely a third or a fourth-hand recount, given the length of time that passed before the house was turned into a tourist attraction, and the written accounts they used were likely already embellished quite a bit. Something tells me historic accuracy wasn't a goal here, but this isn't the only thing we need to address before we finalise our thoughts in this place. No, we need to talk about all the traps and Mr. Handys. Someone else is here with us, and if we go into the basement, we get our first real view of what's been going on here. When we walk in, we find quite a bit of what seems to be fresh blood, something that shouldn't be here, given how long this house has been unoccupied. We could chalk it up to supernatural shenanigans, but that's jumping the gun a bit. The source of this blood can be located in a back room, where several traitors seem to have been disposed of. A ghost really wouldn't have much need of all this, if we're honest, so there seems to be another party at work here. One that does their best to drive us off at multiple points while we're here. We can find this individual upstairs, an individual part of a group that I can't again name on YouTube, but that rhymes with runners. Their name is Zachariah, and we can learn more about them from the terminals located in the room we confront them in. He started by complaining about the terminal he is using, and this won't be the first time he voices complaints regarding the equipment he uses. He does state, however, that he is free now, and we need to read on to find out from what. His second entry details how he broke away from the group at the Mass Pike interchange, where they have a base of operations, of sorts. He brought some supplies with him, and he plans to turn the mansion into a death trap for anyone foolish enough to enter it. He doesn't seem to believe it's haunted. He goes on to reveal that he is the one that set it up so that people could gain entry to the mansion, as a sort of honeypot. It seems even the Minutemen reached the park. Together with the family, we can conclude that he was the one killing people and placing their bodies in the basement, not the supposed ghost. His second last entry reveals that, while this place is great for trapping people, it doesn't offer much in the way of sustenance or food. He may not have thought this all the way through. The final entry is his first and only comment on anything supernatural going on in the house. He says he hears something similar to laughter, which is what happens the first time we come here. Given that he can't figure out which of his robots is doing it, it is reasonable to conclude that none of them are, and it is in fact the same laughter that we are told belongs to a child. The same child we actually see several times in this mansion. A young child wearing a dress with a coil of rope around her waist. The last encounter occurs in the attic, where we can find a lot of Zachariah's gear and dismantled robots. We follow her to a door that closes behind her, open it, and find only a brick wall. This is the last time we see her. Now, let's be real here. That child is definitely a ghost. No doubt about it. Given the manner of Lucy's demise, and the coil of rope the ghost child wears around her waist, I believe it is reasonable to conclude the two are the same. What is up for debate is how true the information we heard was. The terminal states the tour was offline, meaning Lucy herself may have taken steps to enable us to hear her story. But was that so we would know how evil she was? Or so we could hear the ridiculous claims of her parents about ghosts and conclude that she was mistreated, and they made her this way? Of course, now that she is a ghost, that does lend more weight to her parents' initial claims. But then it turns into a chicken and egg situation. Is her being a ghost now proves there was ghosts before? We don't know. The actual house this is based on, the Winchester Mystery Mansion, was built in a similar, though to a greater extent, convoluted manner. Stairs to nowhere, odd rooms, etc. I encourage you to look it up, although the reasons for that were different than the ones here. What really happened to Lucy, we may never know. I've given you the information I have and my thoughts, so you can come to your own conclusions. What is true is that, in this house, centuries later, she's still here, laughing in a manner that she may never have been able to, all those years ago. We all know it wouldn't be a spooky video if we didn't talk about Dunwich Borers, right? A location that's linked to at least one, and possibly more, of the areas in this video. But, before we talk about Dunwich Borers, we need to discuss another location beside it, Hugos Hole. It's a makeshift abode that makes use of the placement of the cut rocks from the quarry to create a shelter for the individual inside, Hugo. When we arrive, there is usually a gunshot, which seems to play, at least for me, every time I arrive. The short passageway to the actual hideaway itself is guarded by numerous mines, a turret, and the most savage of creatures to grace the Commonwealth, the garden flamingo. When we reach the centre, we are greeted with a pretty sorry looking home, and in this case a bloody mattress. But I think the body just despawned. I can't remember if it was here before. We can find out what happened by listening to the holotape entitled Hugos' Struggle.
Guys don't bother me anymore. That's good. I think it's... What was that? Can't they read the signs? I think it's time I go back inside the quarry. It's been too long. No, I can't. The guys would never let me in. I could kill them all. No, that wouldn't be what it would want. It's time to lay down. Yes, of course. It's next to my bed. I will. It's loaded.
So first off, I'm pretty sure this was recorded just before we came here, and the shot we heard was... well, I'm sure you can tell what he did to himself. It seems he used to be a raider, or at least was part of the group that had taken up residence here. Now, he never states that they want to kill him, just that they don't want him in the dig site anymore. Honestly, given his erratic behaviour, this isn't exactly a surprise. We don't know what he did to get kicked out, but we can imagine. He doesn't seem to have any issue with killing everyone, besides that it wouldn't want that, and opts instead to turn the pistol on himself. Now, we don't get any more information about what it is. However, from what he said, it seems to want the raiders in the quarry, and it may have even influenced Hugo to do whatever it was he did, because he even considers killing them all, even if he decided not to in the end. So, let's take a closer look at this place, and see what's really going on. The quarry itself goes down quite deep, meaning you'll have to traverse a lot of walkways with turrets sitting on them. In the centre, we can find the cages where I imagine the raiders kept their prisoners, or cooked their dinner. Really hope it's not the second one. It's entirely possible that they had all gone quite mad by the time we get here, more so than we are shown. Due to this, cooking and eating their prisoners, or perhaps even their own members, may have just been part of it. Alternatively, it could have simply been what it wanted. I will note that there are a lot of nooks and crannies in this place, and I cover all of those in far more detail in my separate video that I did years ago. A link in the description. Now, let's talk about what's going on inside this place. The mine itself is a spooky, raider and ghoul infested, poorly lit barrel of fun. It's not poorly lit now, but I turned all the lights on, which will become relevant later. It goes even further down than the outside, deep, deep into the earth. And it goes without saying, they probably dug way, way too deep. The terminal entries at each station, to a point, give us information on what went on here, and what the working conditions were like. After that, we need to use the names of ghouls and a few holotapes, as well as an interpretation of the visions we are shown, to flesh out the rest. Since Fallout 4 decided to overwrite a lot of my older saves, I don't have footage of said visions, but you can take a look at my older video on this place if you're curious. So, let's take a look at the terminal entries and see just what it was like to work at this wonderful, wonderful place. All the terminal entries contain 3 sections of messages: communications, safety first, and upcoming events. The communication section is the only one that changes over time at each station, so after this Station 1 terminal, it's all we'll focus on. The first entry is the recurring, but slightly varied, urgent message to all managers at each site, asking them to come down to Station 4. Bob Stanson was the manager for Station 1, and he's given no other information at all. The next one is a little odd. It's to management, and the first part is him stating that his requests for support beams are being denied repeatedly. But the second half of it sounds like something management would say to Bob, not him to them. Regardless, it's the first time we see a repeat of safety measures being ignored here. Despite that, in the next entry, updating management on the station, it's been 3 months since anything has happened, though we aren't told what the actual event that occurred was. Someone probably just fell to their death. So yeah, It's fine. The section after this is the most ironic of them all, given what we shall soon find out about this place. Safety. First act of safety. Wear eye protection. Now, I don't know how this isn't a legal requirement to work on this site, and there are enough signs up about it. But apparently, it took a weekly blinding in order to get the staff to actually do it. Though the question of whether or not they were really encouraged that hard before this can be raised. Next is falling debris. It's kind of funny as they state they set up beams, but then some idiot adds in with the least amount of material, which obviously means it's not the best support. They then shamelessly admit it's to save costs, because why not? It's only the lives of your workers. It's also the first time we see a mention of rumbling, which, as I'm sure you noticed, is a standard occurrence here. Constant, in fact. How the advice just wait and see is acceptable and not haul your hole out of there as fast as your legs can carry you, I'll never understand. Lastly is railing, and at this point you can see where this is going. There's not enough, and the ones that are there won't support more than a gentle caress, let alone being leaned on by some hefty buy. Somehow, they only expect the things that prevent people falling to their deaths, which, as they state, they already don't, once every 6 months. Then they say if you find one that is broken, don't worry. Someone's maybe aware of it, probably, or not. So overall, people have died and been blinded, and despite the title of this section, it's clear that they aren't too interested in worker safety. Initially, you might be tempted to chalk it up to a combination of indifference and the company being cheap. And to be honest, yeah, that tracks. But keep another possibility in mind as well. They wanted the workers to get hurt, maimed, or even die, for a different purpose. The last section is upcoming events. Happy Hour tells us of the perks of working here. You can drink in a hellmouth. That's it. The bill is split equally and deducted directly from your wages. This means if you drink in moderation and others have a problem, you get to pay for it. Again, it wouldn't be a Dunwich Borers event if someone hadn't died at some point, and Jerry did just that, plummeting into the bore and dying. They phrase it like drink was the cause, but this just sounds like another way to get their kill count up and avoid responsibility. Lastly is the family picnic. They don't say it's mandatory, but I bet it is. At Dunwich Borers, you aren't having a picnic, you're getting one. You'll enjoy that picnic, whether it's a lovely day or raining cats and dogs. Children misbehaving? Don't worry, we've got a sentry bot for crowd control. It doesn't even take kill shots. I'm sorry, I can't. But seriously, this sounds like they're trying to imply that they are taking steps to keep people safe, while also trying to maximize casualties as well. There is no doubt in my mind that some kid at some point met their end at this picnic. The communications for Station 2 starts with the same urgent message, this time to a John Hatfield, requesting he get down to Station 4 with haste. Next is a thank you message for the new boring machine they were given. This highlights that, if it's related to increased efficiency, and as such, profit, they have no problem spending more money. It's only safety they dislike. The last entry has John throw Station 3 under the bus, claiming any loss in output is their fault, though with the caveat that once they receive some vague materials, all will be well. Honestly, John seems like a bit of a tout. Speaking of Station 3, they too receive the urgent call to get down to Station 4. Bradley Ramone, the manager of Station 3, then requests some railings, which, given the massive drop at Station 3, is a very reasonable request. Of course, saying someone almost died is probably why they refused them. The last entry then again highlights that John is the worst. It seems that the delays are due to a lack of equipment, which would suggest to anyone with half a brain that it simply can't be helped. Now, apart from the entries from the actual facility, we also get some entries from the raider group that was set up here. Presumably, the same group that Hugo was once a member of. They talk at first about cleaning house. They are part of the group that runs Saugus Ironworks, and they were sent by Slag, who needs the iron they were acquiring from here, to find out what was going on. Now, the first warning sign is everyone saying something is wrong with the mine. Presumably they know these people, have worked with them, so dismissal of their fears is a foolish and an ultimately fatal one. After this, we learn that the people being sent down to deal with the feral problem, a problem we have yet to encounter by the way, never made it back. Again, another huge warning sign. The result of their arrogance is shown in the final entry, which is the last terminal entry we need to concern ourselves with. It just says, over and over, I'm safe in the light. We'll get to the topic of the light in a minute. After this, we begin to head into the deepest section of the mine, the section that just seems to swallow up everyone who has went that deep, possibly excluding Hugo. Inside, we can encounter quite a few skeletons from miners, presumably dead from after the initial blast, given they looked like they were still working. Additionally, we begin to encounter ghouls. When we do so, this is usually accompanied by the lights, that up to this point we've been turning on, being extinguished. Alongside this, we hear loud noises, squelching, footsteps, and an increase in the degree of shaking and rumbling, as though we're getting closer to the source. We also begin to experience strange visions, flashbacks, presumably, to the time before the bombs, when the workers were still here, risking their lives in this death trap of a mine. When these visions end, ghouls take the place of the workers. Along with what we find later on, I think this is strong evidence that some of the workers, besides the named ones, were turned into ghouls down here. We can find the other side of the shortcut we passed earlier if we go through Station 5, unlocking the door with a key belonging to an individual called Tim Schutz, a man who will help us understand what happened here. Worth noting that there is some kind of gas leak down here, and if you engage the ghouls in this area, you will be caught up in an explosion. With nothing else to see here, we get to the dreaded Station 4, and we find a holotape from Tim Schutz.
Tim Schutz here. No suspicions were raised when the new equipment was brought in the other day. Crew at Station 4 are still under the impression that we are setting up a new station beyond this area. The standing crew you hired are convincing enough. However, do worry about the project managers at the other stations, especially Bob at Station 1. We all know he takes his job very seriously. His bullet point updates bug the hell out of me. My gut tells me he'll figure out something's going on down here sooner rather than later. Please advise.
Tim reports that no one is suspicious about the new equipment brought in, which they all think is for the assembly of another station. He states that he is worried that the other managers, including Bob Stanson, may figure out something is up. Now, what exactly they are getting up to is unknown to us. We just know that a standing crew is there, presumably at this point beyond Station 4, and they are there to just seem convincing, which means whatever they seem to be doing is separate from the work others are undertaking. After this, we can approach a hole in the cave, which seems to be as far as the construction got. We are given our final flashback at this point. Again, I don't have the footage of it like the others. You can look at my old Dunwich video if you want to see it. To summarise, we walk into a chamber situated over the hole we shall take a look at in a minute. An altar has been constructed, with an individual on it wielding a blade, though not the blade we find later. Arrayed around the altar are several people, all with their hands bound behind them. It has the look of a sacrifice about it. Moreover, the benches surrounding it look old and collapsed, as if this chamber was unearthed, rather than constructed. When we leave the flashback, we find 4 feral ghouls. They are named Bob Stanson, John Hatfield, Bradley Ramone, and Tim Schutz. Because of this, I believe that the people to be sacrificed, or at least some of them, were the workers in the mines. The holotape we find on Tim backs this up.
Tim, good job on keeping things under wraps. We've taken your advice and have asked the other project managers to meet you at Station 4. Stall them if they arrive before we get there. They haven't been told anything. We are very close to accomplishing our goal. Please be patient. You will be rewarded in time.
So Tim was part of this, whatever this was, and this was why the managers were told to report to Station 4. They were to be part of the ritual, or at the very least they were to be ambushed and kept silent. Tim is likely the one who conducted the ritual, based on the same book being present on the back of his ghoulified form as the one we saw in the vision. This begs the question of whether he knew this was to be his reward, or whether this was an accident unrelated to the ritual, which honestly I find pretty unlikely. Venturing into the hole that was beneath the altar in the vision, we can find a monstrous statue at the bottom. But first, the chamber off to the side. The body at the entrance of the chamber is a mystery, but given the presence of the altar in here, and the knife, along with the rest of the chamber, I feel this place was, once upon a time, not underwater. It was likely a place of worship and ritual, with the wicked blade, Crimva's tooth, possibly playing a role in that. The statue at the bottom is another mystery. It may depict Crimva or some other entity, and possibly hints at a larger temple structure beneath all of this. Additionally, it may be the entity itself, with the shaking simply being its movements, it breaking free, or perhaps waking up. The many nukes at the altar are a bit of a mystery, but given that Hugo had a hazmat suit, I think it is likely he placed them back when he still worshipped the forces at work here. Eventually, he was chased out, and while, I believe, under the influence of the power here, did what he did. I believe that the Pur's safety standards here were to ensure that more people died here, that the amount of blood and death soaking into this place was as high as it could possibly be. They dug down here to find the buried site, and possibly Crimva itself, and prepared a final ritual, led by Tim Schutz. However, the result of this, I believe, was the ghoulification of some of the miners. As I talked about in both my fertilization video and my video on Ogqualtoth, both of which are linked, these otherworldly entities thrive on radiation and manipulate people mentally to further their own ends. We saw this with the raiders, and we've seen this now with the ghouls, who seem to have been sent to attack us when we were given the visions. Now, not all the miners were turned, so it could be that, if the ritual didn't do it immediately, it was done shortly before the bombs, so that when the radiation hit, those that survived were turned and made feral. If resurrecting this entity was the goal, then I don't think the bombs hitting was part of that plan, or at least not part of theirs. It may have suited the entity just fine. The name of this place is a play on Dunwich Horrors, a story by H.P. Lovecraft, and the themes are similar to A Shunned House. Again, another story by him. How close the entity is to breaking free, we don't know. And while we have purged this place for now, all it takes is for another group to be tempted by the resources here, to dig too deep. So deep that, once they enter the darkness of this bore, they'll never find their way out. Listening Post Bravo is a creepy location we covered about 5 or 6 years ago, so it's worth looking into again due to its, in my opinion, overt supernatural nature. It exists in close proximity to our previous location, Dunwich Borers, and it is my belief that there is a link between the two of them. Possibly the reason this post was situated out here in the first place. On the surface, we find a guard, long dead, likely as a result of the initial nuclear blast. I say this due to their clothing, along with the idea of them just deciding to come back here for some reason and then somehow dying, being a very odd one. What we are really interested in is found down this elevator. Down it, we find an abandoned and thoroughly damaged military installation, the listening post itself. The far right wall is collapsed and actually offers its own mystery on what you find there. We can also see that there are some active military turrets, ready to give you your non-recommended daily intake of lead. Along with them are a few destroyed protectrons, given that these generally last centuries, as we find plenty that still function in our travels. The how of their destruction is a tricky question. Personally, my money is on the magic Yaguai we find down here. It is found in this side cave that seems to have collapsed around one of the support pillars of this base, or some type of pillar of rock that's just emerged. Inside, as I said, we found a Yaguai, along with some loot, and a confusing number of Brahmin skulls and human skeletons. They all pile on to the overall confusing concept of the Yaguai down here. I say confusing simply because I refuse to believe it found a way to utilize the escalator, not once, but a number of times. Each time it brought prey down here. Even the humans couldn't have come down here, as the turret security system has been activated for some time, as we shall soon see. In the next room, we can find the only other body here that looks like it was here since before the bombs, or at least from around the time. They're slumped out of a chair, so whatever happened to them likely eventually took hold of them, or was caused by their own hand, if you know what I mean. I'm not allowed to say it on YouTube anymore. Although, while we do get told of a weapon in the terminal entries we're about to read, I can't find it beside their body, so either I picked it up, which I don't recall doing, or it's just somehow disappeared. Now, let's take a look at the terminal entries in the other room, as they are what gives this location the title of both creepy and supernatural. There are a total of 5 entries, all wrote by a Sergeant J.P. Rensk. They are ordered by the day they are written on, but given the absence of many days, they may just be whenever they actually had something to report, as opposed to be something they had to do every day. The first states that a Captain Rutledge ordered them here, and they tell us that this facility, or at least their lone responsibility while here, is long-range monitoring, specifically of radio waves. So likely their job was to sift through known or suspected frequencies that interesting or encrypted communications were known to utilize. However, given they likely were doing this by hand, so to speak, it would be very inefficient. They also tell us they'll be down here for a whole month. The second entry is where things get interesting. They state that, while monitoring some low-band frequencies, they picked up an odd repeating message that continued for about an hour. It was in English, though heavily affected by static, and they said the phrases were "internal void," "dreams are getting darker," and "blood runs so still." Along with this, they pick up what they think is a call sign, DEK. They send the information to Washington, implying that these are a kind of coded message, and there is a different meaning behind them. On the surface, it could just be some old equipment transmitting a message. But given the talk of void and blood, and the massive shaft leading to a buried statue not too far from here, I don't think so. For entry 3, they haven't heard anything back regarding the transmission, and they're beginning to get anxious. At this point, only 2 days have gone by since they informed Washington. Regardless, they haven't been able to pick up the messages again. The next entry states that they were woken up by banging on the elevator door. This confused them as it's been in lockdown since they arrived, meaning no one else has actually used it since then. Now they engaged the bunker defense systems, and I want you to remember this, as they're still on when we get here. The banging continued for about an hour, as long as the transmission, in fact, and they believe the two of them are linked, though apart from the length, there isn't really any reason to assume that. The last entry states that the tape they sent to Washington was blank. Now, since they said they were going to send the phrases, I am not sure if it was clips of the phrases from the recording, or them recording the phrases themselves. Regardless, they didn't put anything in the tape. At this point, the supernatural aspect takes a bit of a battering, in that Washington suggests they simply had some auditory hallucinations. Now, to me, I feel like 2 weeks shouldn't be long enough for someone to get to that point that they hallucinate both a specific set of phrases and an hour of pounding on their door. This seems like a cover-up to me, and their mention of being afraid this will go down on their permanent record seems like it was an intentional statement by Washington, meant to make them more worried than concerned about what happened. I mean, there's no way they wouldn't have had to do some sort of evaluation if they were going to be this isolated for this long. So, with all that information, what do I think happened here? Before we continue, I am aware that the initials and the song are a reference to the Dead End Kings, and the song Dead Letters. However, I think we can all agree that it's unlikely he just happened to pick up that song. That likely doesn't exist in their universe, up on the radio. So I'm going to amend my statement in the previous video. I do think that is Rensk in the other room. I think their relief never showed up, given theirs are the last entries. The bombs went off, and they died down here due to lack of supplies, possibly because the elevator was damaged. Another possibility is that the turret system that they activated, and is still hostile when we show up here, killed them. They were shot by it, and crawled off into that room, only to succumb to their injuries. Either way, they didn't make it out of here alive. So, what was the transmission? Well, I think it was related to Dunwich Borers. I still think that original assumption's reasonable to make. They say this was long-range monitoring, but it may be that the military knew what was down there, or had suspicions. Given the proximity, not just distance-wise, but also depth, I find this likely. So, they place a single person down here, and they see what happens. When he sent the tape back to them, they told him it was blank, and either wiped his copy when it was in the terminal, or sent it back blank. The banging could have been something trying to either get to them, or as a way to communicate. Either way, I think that Sergeant J.P. Rensk did have a genuine encounter with the supernatural, and probably spent their last days, and maybe moments, in sheer terror. Our next location is a charming gallery that we looked at many years ago, located in the north of Boston. Pickmans Gallery, owned and curated by the lovely artist of the same name, an artist whose name we can find located on several calling cards. Cards that, unfortunately, are found in the bodies of several people. All raiders though, so, frankly they probably deserve what they got. Inside the room to the right sets the tone with just a staggering display of brutality. And, I guess a questionable artistic ability. It's clear that this Pickman, whoever they were, has had many, many victims, and indeed most of them appear to be raiders. It is in the person of one such individual that we find the only holotape in this place. It's quite harrowing, and gives us some context and information about what happened here.
Seth, it's me. I found out what happened to the scouts who went missing up near the old art gallery. They're dead, Seth. I'm looking at a goddamn painting of Cal's body. Oh, God. What the hell did I do to him? Who the hell is there?
Admiring my collection? I'm afraid it's not complete yet. Soon, though.
Stay away from me, you psycho!
Yes, just like that. Hold that expression on your face.
So yeah, seems like all these raiders didn't meet a particularly charming or pleasant end. Good. Pickman talks about his victims holding their looks of fright and despair as he sets about finishing them off. And this seems to be a common theme in all of his paintings that we can find, primarily in this room, though there is one more located beneath it. All of these paintings, unless I miss my guess, are Pickman's rendering of the final moments of his victims in his own art style. I'm sure there are those among you that could tell me what style this is, but beyond noting its slightly abstract nature, I'm afraid I couldn't expand on it more than that. Now, I want you to take note of a few things. First, all of these paintings have a subject in them, arrayed in what seems to be either a gruesome or a pained manner. Second, all the paintings involved only have three colours: black, yellow, and, most importantly, red, as we shall see later. Third, note the prominence of the eyes in almost all the paintings. Even in the ones where they have been removed, they're still featured in the painting itself. The only ones that seem to be without eyes are the paintings that, to me at least, don't seem to depict his victims any longer. They seem to depict other entities, black-winged or sitting atop thrones of darkness, or in the case of some of them, only the eyes are featured, almost as if he is trying to paint a witness to his crimes, or perhaps to express that he feels watched, or perhaps even witnessed. Given the otherworldly nature of some of the paintings, it's not too much of a stretch to say that something strange was going on, and in his mind, possibly something otherworldly. The upper floors are explored in more detail in the video I did in this place 5 years ago, as is the extensive sewer network underneath the building. Suffice to say that he seems to prepare most of his bodies on the upper floors, and he sets up the sewer system as a maze/escape route that he made quite a bit of use of when we do find him down there, being chased by associates of the raiders he made his victims. Down the stairs, leading to this sewer network, we can find what was, given what was said in the holotape, possibly the final painting he needed to prepare, and it is here that we find out exactly how he got his paint, or at least the red paint. He used the blood of his victims, or at least he used them for the red paint. The yellow could be bile or something similar, and the black possibly could have been derived from a mixing of the two of them with something else. The last painting seems to depict something watching a lot of people, suffering or burning in some manner. It's also the only painting that has something akin to runes or writing on it, with one or two of the others approximating this, but not to this extent. So we know the victims are literally part of the paintings, whether or not, for the portraits, if they were indeed that, only that victim's blood was incorporated into the painting is unknown. However, for the other more vague ones depicting things, entities, creatures, I'm not sure, but it's likely that the act of terror or pain when the life was taken was seen as integral to this process by Pickman. Part of a ritual, as it were, or a recording of this pain and suffering on canvas, giving it some degree of permanency. If we are to believe that this was something communicating with Pickman, well then it's likely that it instructed Pickman on the details of the process. The painting of the eyes may be his way of allowing them, or it, to look out into the world, to see the world, and as such make decisions on how it would like him to proceed. When we actually find Pickman, and if we choose to aid him, he, to be honest, doesn't give us much in the way of information about any of this. He rewards us with a blade, and beside that, he just walks away and eventually disappears. The character himself is based, like a few of the more supernatural areas in Fallout 4, on the work of H.P. Lovecraft, or at least work related to the Cthulhu mythos. He is based on the character Richard Upton Pickman from Pickman's Model. In this story, a man goes to a gallery created by Richard, and there views many of his grotesque works, depicting things not of this world. The last painting is of a monstrous dog or a hound. However, when Pickman leaves the room, the man finds an actual photo of the creature, signifying that it was in fact real, and possibly that many of the other creatures and entities depicted were real as well. Given the inspiration, the things that Pickman sees as well may also be real. His depictions or communications with the being, such as Crimve in Dunwich Borers, Ugqualtoth, or perhaps something else entirely. The raiders may have been sacrifices to achieve this communication, or were directly at the behest of this entity, if it was indeed real. However, since Pickman isn't talking, we can only speculate. If we are going to cover the supernatural in Fallout 4, then we can't neglect one of the strangest encounters we have in the whole game, let alone just in Far Harbor. I speak, of course, of the Fog Mother, the strange shadowy entity that appears to us in a vision. I have a whole video on her, but I want to talk about her again. Back then we covered her appearance in detail, but I will touch on it again here. Unfortunately, I have no footage of her, because Fallout 4 decided to overwrite all my save files, so we're gonna have to use our imaginations. She seems like a completely ordinary woman. I mean, yes, she seems to drink in the light itself, and she emits a constant stream of fog, but apart from all that, totally ordinary. She has a haunting voice that seems to come from all around us, not just the figure in front of us. This could suggest that the island itself is speaking to us, and the Fog Mother is just a more acceptable avatar for them to utilize. While in the vision, we experience many strange things, sort of like a shadow world that we can only see once we have partook of the spring's jungle juice. This world may be one that she actually exists in, just removed from our own. While in it, we see a number of creatures native to the island deferring to her, and to an extent, ourselves as well. As I brought up before, if she can control them, and is in fact a real person, she could be a psyker, as other individuals in the Fallout universe have demonstrated the ability to bend other creatures to their whim using only their minds. She appears and disappears seemingly at will, lending some credence to the claims of her being a supernatural entity. You know, if the appearance and the shadow world weren't enough to convince you. But to learn a bit more about her, we need to talk about what the children of Adam think about her, and the journey we undertake that leads to her. Our encounter with the Fog Mother comes apart as part of an initiation ritual into the children of Adam. We are asked to go to Adam's spring and drink deep of something. We never actually find out what it is, and we aren't able to repeat the process, so we can't determine if it's actually the spring or something added to it when we arrived. It's also important to remember that, whatever this is, most people don't return, which initially might make you think poison. But I have another theory, which I'll get to. First, I want to look at what we find at the end of our journey. The terminus of our journey brings us to the place that I suspect is where the field initiates actually end up. They become feral ghouls, acting as a trial for all the others that wish entry into the cult. Now, what is odd is that the harming of these creatures is against the beliefs of the children of Adam. They would as soon let themselves be killed by a ghoul than kill it, unless I am misremembering. So it is odd that we are asked to do so. Inside, we can actually find the word mother spelled out using elements in the periodic table related to nuclear weapons and materials. Again, it looks like a ghoul may have painted this on. Whether they were a ghoul when they started painting it is a different story. Could it be that whatever is in the water has some ability to accelerate the process of ghoulification? or perhaps ensures that some people who partake in it become feral? I'll link my ghoul feralization video in the description if you're curious about the process. The icon we come here to find is needed to complete the quest, and also found here is a stealth boy, and a note saying Adam's servants are watching. This all seems fairly standard, until we consider what Richter says when we return. He tells us that we are guided by the Mother of the Fog, or the Fog Mother. Now, what is interesting is what she means to the children of the Atom. Richter tells us that she was presumably the one who led the children here in the first place, that any individual that sees her is deemed worthy of not only joining, but of being more integral to the overall goals and the plans of the children of Atom. The visions involving her are apparently quite rare. Some say she's just an island spirit, an avatar of Atom, or just an old hermit, which we'll get to later. First, here's an interaction we can have with one of the children after we finish the quest.
Slobbering goon? Do people have bad reactions to the spring?
Few make it through the ritual intact. Sort of the point. A vision from Adam is a great honor, not something to be granted to the unworthy. So tell me, what did you see?
So the spring is supposed to hurt people?
The spring shows who's capable of serving Adam and who is not. Clearly Adam saw your strength and blessed you with the vision of...
A woman. She guided me to a small shrine. The Grand Zealot said she was called the Mother of the Fog.
What? You? Saw the Mother of the... How did... I guess it's not our place to question the ways of Adam. If there's anything I or the other Zealots can do to serve, all you need to do is ask.
Adam ever grant you any visions?
Sort of. My parents were settlers. Tried to carve out a life for us in the fog. Moved us all out there when I was just a girl. Made do for a couple years. Adam's Veil hadn't claimed the whole of the island back then. But then came this storm. A rad storm. Unlike anything the island had ever seen. Our little homestead didn't stand a chance. I was the only one to survive, thanks to my blessing. Adam's blessing. I wandered for days, living off whatever I could scrounge, drinking puddles and salt water, until I stumbled on a spring. The spring. A vision I had. It felt like it lasted for days. I was back in the storm, but I wasn't afraid. I was in control. When I finally came to, I was in Richter's arms. He carried me back here and raised me to serve Adam.
We can see just how surprised they are that this has occurred. In fact, I'd hazard to say that we may be the first in a long time to have actually had any interaction with her at all. This begs the question as to what the other initiates are exposed to, what they see, and whether they undergo a different trial that doesn't involve a mother icon. However, I want to call your attention back to something. Richter's stating that she is actually a mad old hermit. So of course, looking around for the accommodation that would possibly suit such an individual does bear some fruit. We can find a dilapidated house in Haddock Cove, south of a Children of Atom shrine. Inside, on the top floor, apart from some dreaded mannequins, we can find a setup that suggests someone has been squatting here, or living, I guess, as it's probably their house, for some time now. The most important information comes from what's on the table, and what's under it. The first note likely refers to a quest you can undertake on behalf of Richter after you join the cult. The second refers to the crumbling base that the Children of Atom are currently situated in. The last two, however, are the really interesting ones. I'm not sure what order they occur in, so I'll go top and then bottom. The first refers to a stranger arriving on the island. This likely refers to us, and they dealt with their uncertainty regarding that individual by appearing to them in person. Now, why that made a difference, I'm not sure. Maybe if you can still see straight and follow simple instructions after ingesting whatever is in that spring, you've passed. Who knows? The one under the table states they discovered a safer way to watch. I think this is clearly the Stealth Boys, which are likely related to the presence of one at the shrine that we end up at. So I believe that the Fog Mother is likely a human, possibly a ghoul. They watch the Children of Atom, and when a suitable candidate turns up, they present themselves at the shrine. They could possess some psyker-like abilities, given they had to navigate and stay hidden without Stealth Boys for some time, and they may have affected the ghouls near the shrine as well. Possibly the creatures we see in the vision, but we cannot be sure those are actually real. whether or not Adam is really speaking to her, or through her. Well, I'll leave that up to you. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, it's another attempt at a bit of a longer form type of content that I tried previously with my World of Refreshment video. That video will be re-uploaded soon with all of the phrases that I think YouTube is misflagging as other words silenced, so hopefully this time it won't get age restricted. When it does come out, I would appreciate it if you would go back on and like and comment, just to see if we can get the performance back up to what it was before. If you did like this type of longer form content, also a like and comment goes a long way, and I would be interested to hear about other areas that you would like me to cover, or perhaps other areas I've already covered that you think combining into one video would be interesting. If you do have that opinion, please leave a comment in the comment section and I will try and get back to you or try to take it under consideration. I should have another video up shortly after this discussing upcoming content and some content I'm going to be redoing or remastering as it is, because some of my old content is just, it's not great. Outdated audio, low quality video, the works. So that should be coming out soon. I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next one. And until then, goodbye.